Welcome back to Morning Live. Well, the month of March marks Human Rights Month right here in South Africa. And to highlight issues pertaining to human rights, the South African Human Rights Commission celebrated its 20th year anniversary by holding a conference under the theme, the South African Human Rights Commission 20 Years Anniversary Conference on Racism. Now, to share with us more about the South African Human Rights Commission's 20 years anniversary, as well as the conference, we're joined in studio by Shireen Motara, the Chief Operations Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission. A very good morning to you, Shireen.
Thank you.
Now, we understand that, currently in the country, racism has been, a big issue affecting a lot of South Africans. A lot of complaints have been launched, I understand, with the Human Rights Commission. But what other issues have you been challenged with as the Commission?
Well, I think the broader issue of inequality. So racism is a part of inequality, but there are general concerns around inequality, and I think a lot of concern around access to basic services. So we have provincial offices across the country, and all our offices, most of our offices work with communities around the issue of access to basic services.
And what programs do you have in place to educate people about, the basic human rights? I'm thinking usually when it's Human Rights Month, that's when so much attention it's placed on one's human rights. But throughout the year, are there any programs you have in place?
Yes, so our provincial offices again work directly with communities through our advocacy and education programs. A lot of the programs are around understanding human rights, but they're also around giving advice to communities who ordinarily wouldn't have access to advice around their human rights and how to access redress for human rights violations.
And you spoke about inequality being the bigger problem as well. Racism also being, a challenge right here in the country. But since the establishment of the Human Rights Commission, what has been some of your successful, highlights and some areas which you've overcome so far?
Well, I think we've, it's been a good 20 years, but also a challenging 20 years, because as we see some of the issues continue to plague us. The Commission has done a lot of work across different sectors, engaging with, for example, business on the issue of human rights, and we have an ongoing program around business and human rights. We have worked directly with and brought relief to communities, for example, in the Western Cape and in Free State, where communities have not had access to proper sanitation. And at least on that level, we were able to make sure that the local governments or the local municipalities address those issues. On a broader level, we have worked with a range of stakeholders across education, higher education and basic education, to engage about the issues of inequality in those spaces, but also about access to education for children, but also access to education at a tertiary level.
Right. Now, I remember, in the beginning of the year when the, racism spate, especially from, the whole Penny Sparrow, outbreak happened in the country. There was a link that circulated on Twitter regarding those who would like to lay a complaint to do so and to click on the link. But for those who also don't know how to lay a complaint, because it was the first time I actually saw that link, for someone who doesn't know how to lay a complaint, if they feel that their human rights are violated or even don't have access to the internet, how do they go about doing so?
So we have a number of channels where people could lay complaints. At our provincial offices, we provide access for people to go directly to our offices to lay complaints, including our Gauteng office. We also take complaints via the telephone. We also take complaints via email and our social media as well. So, and then on our website, we also have a space to lodge complaints.
Right.
But for us, part of the challenge has been that the communities that really need our services are often the ones that don't have access to the various channels that we offer. So part of what we do is provide human rights clinics in communities in the different provinces to enable communities, one, as you said, to understand their rights, but two, to be able to lodge their human rights violations with us for investigation.
Right. Now, let's talk about, the conference that took place, I understand, this past Monday and Tuesday. I understand, you were, celebrating as the Human Rights Commission 20 years anniversary conference, and it was also themed on racism.
Yes.
Take me through some of the highlights that took place from the event, some of your key speakers.
Okay, so the first day of the conference was essentially a reflection of the 20 years of the work of the Commission. And we primarily had our current and previous commissioners talking to some of the work that the Commission has done, the early days. And then the second day was the theme focused on racism. And we had a number of keynote speakers. We had former President Thabo Mbeki, who opened the day. We had former Constitutional Judge van der Westhuizen. We had Dr. Matole Mochecha from the Portfolio Committee on Justice. And then in our parallel sessions, looking at different sectors, we had a number of leaders in the different sectors. So in business, we had Mr. Alan Mukoki, who's the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We had Matata Tsedu and Adrian Basson from the media. We had various commissioners from Chapter 9 institutions. And so the focus was trying to look at, at the place where we are, what is happening.
Right.
But taking a serious look into this issue of racism. But I think the big recognition is that racism is not a new issue. Perhaps social media is making the issue look bigger. But I think from the Commission side, for example, we deal with complaints of racism on a daily basis. So the one of the largest number of complaints that we do receive are around racism, and they come from a range of communities. Right. So it's not just, social media where the issue is big. But also recognizing that there has to be a multi-sectoral approach, meaning that various sectors have to play a role in addressing the issue of human rights. And I think some of the outcomes of the conference were around recognizing that and talking to the fact that, for example, business has been fairly on the sidelines of the conversation around human rights. Right. And mainstreaming human rights in how they operate. And it becomes a particular concern, for example, when you think of the economy, because we find that the inequality is an issue because of economic access.
Absolutely.
And so if business is not a critical part of the conversation and taking steps to do something, then the likelihood that we will see an improvement in the situation of people that are marginalized from the economy. Right. is very small.
All right, Shireen, unfortunately that's all the time we had for you this morning, but thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. But of course, that's Shireen Motara, that's the Chief Operations Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission, telling us more about the conference that took place, of course, this past couple of days, whereby they were celebrating 20 years of their anniversary as a commission, also looking into racism. But that's where we leave it for now. I'm going to hand over now to Philip Hawkins for the latest.